Hey everybody, welcome back!
My daughter invited everyone. Except me. But what happened next left her speechless. My daughter sent out the wedding invitations. I didn't receive one. When I asked her, she told me, "It's just that you and Mom don't get along, and I don't want drama." But her mom and her stepfather weren't just invited, they were the hosts. What happened next was quite unexpected. I used to believe that love was demonstrated by what you gave, time, money, presents, that if you kept showing up, kept sacrificing, kept giving without keeping score, eventually it would mean something. That one day your child would look back and see the invisible scaffolding you built beneath their dreams and say, "Thanks, Dad." That was what kept me standing all those years after the divorce. Not the hope of recognition or payment, but the faith that my role, although often silent and relegated, was essential, that it mattered. So when my daughter Emily got engaged, I didn't hesitate. I offered help with the venue, contributed to dress fittings, and even scheduled a bank transfer to cover the honeymoon fund she was so stressed about. It was my way of saying, "I'm still here, I'm still your father." And being honest, I was proud of the woman she was becoming, even if I wasn't always invited to the front row of her life. I didn't expect a standing ovation. I didn't expect to be the one walking her down the aisle. Her relationship with her mother was always complicated, and I knew better than to assume anything. But I did expect an invitation, that minimal recognition, that symbol that despite our family fractures, I was still part of the story. I found out I hadn't been invited 2 weeks after the invitations were sent. It wasn't even Emily who told me. It was my sister Karen, who had received hers and casually asked if I planned to stay at a hotel or drive back home after the ceremony. I told her I hadn't received anything yet, assuming it was a postal error. But when I texted Emily, she replied 2 hours later with a, "Hey, can we talk?" No warmth, no exclamation marks, no, "I love you," just that line that already tightened my stomach. I sat on the back porch, phone in hand, while she explained her reasoning like an HR manager firing someone. "It's just that you and Mom really don't get along," she said. "And I don't want drama on the most important day of my life." The way she said it, cold, clipped, as if she were reading a script she practiced in front of the mirror, made me feel like an inconvenience, not a father. At first, I didn't even get angry. I just blinked in confusion. I gently reminded her that we hadn't had an incident in over a decade, that I had always been civil, even when her mother threw passive-aggressive comments at me in public. Even when her stepfather made it clear that I was tolerated, not welcomed. "It's just easier this way," she said. That was when the rage arrived. Not explosive, but low and hot, like embers burning old wood. What stunned me most wasn't the exclusion, but the way she framed it. As if I had to understand, as if I should feel and say, "Sure, honey, whatever makes you happy." I swallowed the lump in my throat and asked quietly, "Is your mom going?" She hesitated a second too long. "Well, yes, she and Roger are actually helping as hosts." That was the moment everything clicked. This wasn't about avoiding drama, it was about maintaining appearances with control. Her mother and Roger had their hands all over the wedding, and I was the variable that didn't fit the narrative. The years I spent helping Emily in college, co-signing her first lease, paying for her broken laptop and parking tickets didn't matter. I was good enough to finance her milestones, but not to witness them. That night, I opened my online banking and canceled the scheduled transfer for the honeymoon $3,000 that was due to be sent in 3 days to help her start her married life with something special. I didn't do it out of spite. I sat there for a long time thinking before hitting cancel, wondering if I was being petty. But the more I thought about it, the clearer I saw it. She didn't see me as her father. Not when it mattered. She saw me as a benefactor, a convenience, a polite box to check when she needed a boost. And if being her father was so conditional, if it only counted when I was silent and invisible, then let her finance her own honeymoon. The next day she called. I let it go to voicemail. Then another message. "Hey, something weird happened with the honeymoon fund." Can you check? Still no apology, no acknowledgement of what she had done. I looked at the message for a full minute before replying. I cancelled it. Since I'm not going to be part of your wedding, it seemed fair not to contribute to it. She replied in minutes. Seriously? You're punishing me for wanting peace on my wedding day? I didn't answer. What was I going to say? She had already decided my presence was a threat to her peace. Let her enjoy it without me. That afternoon I sat in my parked car outside the supermarket, staring at the steering wheel as if it could offer me answers. This wasn't just about a wedding, it was about years of feeling like I had to earn my place. Years of hearing, explicitly or implicitly, that my ex's new family was more cohesive, more presentable, more useful. I had stayed in the shadows because I thought that was what love required. But the only thing I did was teach my daughter that I didn't need to be considered, that I would always say yes, no matter how little I received in return. I hadn't finished loving my daughter, but I was finished being a doormat. I kept telling myself I had misunderstood, that I had taken it too personally, that maybe in some twisted logic, Emily really believed she was preserving the peace. But peace doesn't require erasing yourself, it requires respect. And I was starting to see that my presence wasn't inconvenient because I caused drama. It was inconvenient because I reminded people of truths they preferred not to face. Divorce is messy. Co-parenting is even harder. But pretending a father disappeared into thin air just to keep everything pretty for a wedding, that is cowardice disguised as elegance. And the more I thought about it, the more I saw it wasn't an isolated decision. This had been building for years, silently, subtly, but with clear intention. I was never part of her ideal picture. I was only allowed to be in the margins, in the footnotes, within parentheses in her life. I didn't go looking for confirmation, but the universe has a way of showing you what you need to see, even when you're not looking. A week after canceling the transfer, I opened Facebook for the first time in months. I had no intention of scrolling far, just checking messages, but the algorithm knew me better than I knew myself. There it was, a photo of Emily and her fiancé in front of a floral arch, holding sample menus and laughing, with a caption that read, "Wedding tasting with the best hosts. Can't wait for September." Tagged in the photo were her mother, her stepfather Roger, and several guests. Not a mention of me, not even a simple thank you. The words, "best hosts," burned like acid. I stared at that phrase for what felt like an hour, the screen's glow mocking me in the dark room. I didn't expect praise, but I did expect honesty. At least transparency. She let me believe I was contributing to something where I was welcome. She let me finance part of the dream while actively eliminating me from the script. That kind of betrayal doesn't scream. It whispers, slowly undermining your sense of reality. I closed the app and leaned back in my chair, replaying every conversation we'd had in the last 6 months. The way she always deflected when I asked about preparations, the vague updates, the forced laughter, the careful omission sit was all there. I just hadn't wanted to see it. That night I called my sister Karen again, the only one in the family who never made me feel like a visitor within my own blood. She didn't know the whole story, just that something was wrong. When I told her everything, how I wasn't invited, how I had cancelled the honeymoon money, how Emily tried to make it look like I was the petty one, Karen stayed silent for a long moment, then said, "You know. She used to brag about you in college. She always said you were the reason she managed to pass her midterms." What the hell happened? That question hung between us. What had happened? Karen didn't defend Emily, but she didn't condemn her either. She just listened. Then she said something I hadn't considered before. "I think your presence scares her. Not because you're a threat, but because you remind her of who she was before the perfect photos and the curated posts. You're real, and that's harder to handle." That hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so long believing I was the outsider because of my history with her mother, because I wasn't rich or flashy or part of the new family ecosystem. But maybe it was something deeper. Maybe I was too honest, too raw, too resilient to be packaged inside the fantasy she was trying to build. 2 days later, Emily texted me again. "I really think you're overreacting. It's just one day. I didn't mean to hurt you." I almost laughed. One day, as if that day weren't the symbol of every slow rejection that had preceded it. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. But I did start writing something not for her, but for me. I opened a blank document on my laptop and started typing every memory, every sacrifice, every time I drove across town to bring her soup when she was sick or transferred money because her paycheck arrived late. Every birthday card her mother forgot to give me, every school play I attended even when my name wasn't on the guest list. I wrote it all down, not because I needed her to read it, but because I needed to see it, to remember that I had been there again and again, even when I was invisible to her. The document ended up being 12 pages long, and when I finished, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, not closure, but clarity. I couldn't keep pretending this was about a single decision. Emily had made a series of choices revealing her priorities, and I had made mine too. The difference was that I wasn't hiding behind excuses. I own what I did. I cancelled the honeymoon fund because I refused to pay for my own disappearance. If she wanted to live in a world where I didn't exist, she could finance it herself. Karen invited me to dinner that weekend. She made lasagna and poured me a generous glass of wine, the kind that burns a little going down but leaves a pleasant warmth afterward. Halfway through the meal, she looked at me and said, "You know, if she ever comes back, it will be because you stood your ground. Not despite it." I nodded, but I wasn't holding my breath. Forgiveness wasn't my goal. Boundaries were. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was drawing one that mattered. Not just to protect myself, but to remind Emily that love isn't a blind sacrifice, it's mutual recognition. And if she couldn't see me, then I had to take a step back until she could. The phone rang just after 8 p.m. I was standing at the sink, scraping the last remnants of my dinner into the trash bin when her name lit up the screen. I let the first call ring, then the second. I had been avoiding her calls all week. Partly because I knew where the conversation would go, and partly because I wasn't ready to hear the version of me she had rehearsed. I didn't want to hear a monologue built on guilt, deflections, and half-truths. But on the third call, something inside me snapped. Not out of obligation, but exhaustion. I dried my hands, looked at the phone for a second longer, and answered without saying hello. Her voice came through sharp and already annoyed. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted to see if she would slow down, if she would recalibrate, but she didn't. "You cancelled the honeymoon money. Seriously? Are you really that petty?" Her tone didn't even feign confusion or hurt. It was pure entitlement, as if I had revoked a gift she had already cashed. I took a deep breath, holding back the wave of anger threatening to rise up my throat. "I cancelled it because I realized I was funding a wedding to which I am not invited," I said calmly, but firmly. "Why would I pay for a celebration I'm not even allowed to witness?" There was a pause, just a few seconds. Then she huffed. "It's not about that," she blurted out. "It's about keeping everything from blowing up. You and Mom can't be in the same room without tension." I didn't want to deal with that on my wedding day. That was the moment I knew she hadn't called to talk. She had called to justify, to manipulate, to paint herself as the reluctant victim trapped in a storm she claimed she hadn't created. I almost hung up right there, but something in me needed her to hear it. To truly hear it for the first time. "You mean you didn't want to deal with me? Let's not pretend this is about your mother's feelings. She and Roger are organizing the wedding. Remember, you chose a side. You made that decision. But don't act surprised when the consequences come." Her voice rose, shrill and defensive. "This is so childish. Dad, I thought you were better than this. It's just one day. Why are you making it all about you? That phrase 'about you'. That was the twist of the knife. It's what people say when they want to change the narrative, when they want to shift the blame from their own betrayal to your reaction. I laughed, bitter and humorless. You think I'm making this about me? Emily, you erased me. You made me invisible. And you want me to sign checks for that privilege? Her silence was deafening. It wasn't shock, it was calculation. She was trying to figure out how to regain control of the conversation, but I didn't give her the chance. Let me tell you something, I continued, my voice lower, steadier. I've been there for you every time you needed me. I paid for college, helped you move into your first apartment, bailed you out with the car, with fees, with overdrafts. I did all that not because I had to, but because I wanted you to feel safe. Cared for. And you turned around and treated me like a nuisance. I heard her breath hitch for a second, and for an instant, I thought maybe, just maybe, something had pierced her wall. But then came the rebuttal. The counterattack. You're twisting everything. I never said you weren't important. I just didn't want tension. Why can't you understand that? The frustration in her voice didn't come from regret. It came from inconvenience. It bothered her that I had the audacity to defend myself, that I didn't accept my role as the silent benefactor. I heard the edge of tears, but they weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of not getting what she wanted. You're acting like this is betrayal. It's not. It's just logistical issues. I couldn't take it anymore. No, Emily. Logistics is choosing the right color napkins. Betrayal is erasing your father from your wedding. My voice cracked slightly on the last word, and I knew then that I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. Heartbroken. Done. If to you I'm just an ATM, you've already made your last withdrawal. Don't call me again. And I hung up. I stood in the middle of the kitchen staring at the phone as if it might start bleeding. My chest ached. Not like panic, but like grief, as if something permanent had finally broken. 15 minutes later, my best friend Marcus showed up. I had texted him earlier asking if he wanted to grab a beer, and he arrived with a six-pack and that sense of timing only true friends have. I didn't tell him every detail, just the essentials. He nodded in silence, jaw clenched and eyes narrowed. Then he cracked open a beer and said, "You know what the problem is? You were always too available. That girl never had to wonder if you'd be there, so she stopped valuing it." I didn't answer right away. He was probably right, but hearing it hurt more than I expected. He kept talking without looking away. Sometimes you have to stop bleeding for people who wouldn't even offer you a band-aid. That sentence hit me harder than anything Emily had said. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. I had been bleeding out for years silently, politely, invisibly. And for what? To be excluded from the one day I thought I'd be by her side. Not behind her. We sat in silence for a while after that, no more analysis, no more what-ifs, just two men drinking in a kitchen that had seen too many sacrifices. Then I knew I wasn't going back. Not to that version of me. Not to the man who kept giving even when broken. Did I still love my daughter? Of course. But love without boundaries isn't love, it's martyrdom. And I was done dying on altars that never honored me. The repercussions didn't take long. I thought maybe, just maybe, everything would fade into silence. Some kind of strange distance between us that would end up becoming the new normal. But that's not how families like mine work, where pride disguises itself as principles and everyone prefers a second-hand story to a first-hand truth. It all started with a vague post from my ex-wife, Denise. I wasn't even following her anymore, but Karen sent me a screenshot, a blurry photo of Emily and Roger at the wedding tasting with the caption, "So proud of these two and so grateful for the true support system that got us here. Loyalty shows itself in hard times." No names, no tags, but the insinuation hit like a slap. I wasn't a support system, I wasn't loyal. I was the shadow they had conveniently edited out of the frame. At first, I laughed not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Denise had always loved those little staged scenes, curated righteousness, always vague enough to avoid direct confrontation but loaded enough to stoke the fire. She knew exactly what she was doing. And judging by the avalanche of likes and hearts from her side of the family, the performance had been well received. I stayed off social media for a week, not because I was hiding, but because I didn't trust myself not to respond. The old me, the one who bent over backwards to keep the peace, might have written a diplomatic comment or sent a private message asking her to take it down. But the man I was now didn't need to ask for space. He claimed it. But social networks are never contained, they spread like smoke. Soon calls started coming in. Some were disguised accusations. My cousin Teresa left a message saying, "I'm sure there's more to the story, but it seems extreme. You know, it's a wedding." Others were less subtle. My older brother called to ask why I had set off a bomb against my daughter. "You can't undo these things, brother," he said. As if I had burned a bridge that never really existed. I let them talk. Then I told them calmly that I wouldn't discuss the matter, and just like that, the judgment solidified. The silent condemnation settled over me like dust. I could feel it even when no one said anything. The change in tone, the longer pauses in chats, the sudden exclusion from family dinners because there might be tension. Not only had they left me out of the wedding, now they were slowly exiling me from the entire narrative. The loneliness was real, but so was the clarity. I spent a lot of time alone those weeks, cleaning the garage, reorganizing closets, walking longer routes through the park not because I needed distraction, but because I needed space to hear myself think. And what I heard most was pain, not just for Emily, but for the version of me that believed love could fix everything. That if you gave enough time, money, patience, eventually they would give something back. I mourned that man because he had loved purely, but I also let him go because he had loved blindly, and that blindness had cost me too much. Still, there were moments of unexpected comfort. A few days after Denise's post, I received a message from my niece Sophie, Karen's daughter. We hadn't spoken in months, but her words brought a warmth I didn't know I needed. "Uncle Dan," she wrote, "I know everyone is taking sides right now, but I just wanted you to know that I see you and I understand. Parents are humans too. You were always there for Emily. If she can't see that, it's not your fault." I read that message 5 times. It didn't undo the damage, but it was like finding a light switch in a dark room. Someone still saw me. Someone still remembered me. A week later, I ran into an old neighbor at the supermarket, Mrs. Houston, who used to babysit Emily when she was little. She asked if I was excited about the wedding. When I told her I wasn't invited, her eyes went wide. "But it was always you picking her up from school," she said, genuinely confused. That stuck with me. "It was always you." That phrase resonated for days. It reminded me that presence isn't always loud, sometimes it's quiet, constant, unglamorous, and sometimes it's taken for granted until it disappears. Karen invited me over again that weekend. She didn't ask questions this time, she simply poured me a drink and put old home videos on the TV. Christmas mornings, school plays, birthdays. We sat there watching Emily as a child, her little hand in mine, her eyes lighting up when I lifted her onto my shoulders. "She loved you so much," Karen whispered. "She probably still loves you, but sometimes people hurt those they know will never leave." That line hit me harder than I expected because she was right. Emily never believed I would leave. She thought she could keep taking, keep diminishing me, because I would always come back, always keep the peace, always say, "It's okay, I understand." But this time I didn't understand, and it wasn't okay. The next day I started therapy. I had put it off for years thinking I didn't need it, but I realized I had spent too much time swallowing my own feelings so everyone else would be comfortable. I needed to dismantle that part of me that allowed this dynamic to grow. Not to blame myself, but to ensure I didn't give away my worth so easily again. My therapist, Lana, didn't say much during the first session. She just listened. Listened for real, in a way that made my chest ache. At the end, she said, "What you're describing isn't a failure of parenting, it's a failure of recognition. You were there, and that is the most honest form of loving." Those words stayed with me. I repeated them like a mantra every time doubt crept in. Every time I wondered if I had gone too far by cutting Emily off, I remembered that I hadn't gone too far. I had gone exactly as far as I needed to recover my peace. And if that peace cost me the illusion of being a good father, in the eyes of others, then so be it. I preferred to be at peace alone than to be used in the name of love. The morning of Emily's wedding arrived quiet and gray, as if the sky itself didn't know how to feel. I woke up before the alarm, before the sun, and sat in bed for a long time listening to the silence, the small aches in my body, the absence of the excitement that should have been there. For most of my life, I imagined that day differently. I thought there would be a tuxedo hanging on my closet door, a carefully folded speech in my jacket pocket, and maybe a few butterflies fluttering in my stomach. But instead, I was sitting there in sweatpants staring at the ceiling, wondering if she would think of me as she walked down that aisle, wondering if her heart would waver even for a second upon realizing that the hand guiding her belonged to someone else. Not her father, but the man she chose to replace him. I didn't have a plan for the day. No distraction prepared, no task to keep me busy, I didn't even turn on the TV. Instead, I drove. I got in the car, turned the key without a destination in mind, and let the road decide. It took me north, past the downtown streets, past the suburbs where trees were starting to show their autumn colors, and finally to the very edge of the city. I realized about 30 minutes later that I was driving toward the venue. Not because I wanted to crash the wedding, I wasn't that kind of man, but because I think a part of me needed to see her. I needed to be close enough to say goodbye to something invisible, something that had been dying long before either of us admitted it out loud. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't enter the parking lot or go up the hill. I stopped at a gas station half a kilometer away and parked around back, where no one could see me. From there, I could barely glimpse the white tent they had rented and the cars arriving. I watched as people arrived, dressed in pastel suits and floral dresses, smiling for photos in front of the welcome sign that I knew didn't bear my name. I wondered how many knew, how many had asked about me, how many had heard that I simply decided not to come. That was the narrative I imagined Denise had sold herself. The story that made me the villain and kept her hands clean. Around noon, I left. I couldn't keep watching. The pain in my chest was turning into something sharp, something too similar to shame, and I knew I didn't deserve that. So I went back home. I made myself a sandwich I didn't finish and sat on the porch as the hours passed. I tried not to imagine the ceremony, the vows, the kiss, the applause. I tried not to think about Emily laughing with a glass of champagne in her hand, dancing under warm lights, without looking over her shoulder even once to see if her father was watching. But the mind is cruel. It plays the movie anyway, even when you close your eyes. It was shortly after 10 when my phone vibrated. A voicemail without a missed call, just the recording, which meant she didn't even want to risk a real conversation. I looked at the notification for a full minute before hitting play. Her voice came through soft, slightly heavy, not drunk, but with that weariness of someone who has been carrying too much for too long. "Hi," she said, followed by a long pause. I don't know. Everyone kept asking where you were. I had to lie again because you made everything revolve around you." Another pause. The air got stuck in my chest. It was supposed to be a simple day. "Dad, you didn't have to turn it into a message. You didn't have to hurt me like this." Her voice cracked at the end, but not from regret, but from frustration, as if I had broken some unwritten rule she believed I should follow forever. There was no apology, no reflection, just disappointment because I didn't accept the role she assigned me. Absent, silent, invisible, but still paying the bill. I deleted the message without listening to it again. Not out of anger, but because I knew if I listened to it again, I might start believing her version of the story, and I could no longer afford that. That night I opened the box I kept at the back of the closet. Inside were old photos, drawings she made in kindergarten, birthday cards with crooked letters and excess glitter stuck to them. I went through them slowly, one by one, letting the memories surge without pushing them away. There she was in her soccer uniform, missing a tooth. There we were building a pillow fort in the living room, her face lit up with joy. Those moments were real. That love was real. Nothing that happened now could take that away from me, but it was in the past. And clinging too tightly to them only made the present hurt more. At some point, I found myself writing again. Not for Emily this time, not even for myself, really. Just as a way to release. I wrote about the love that gives without needing applause. About the pain of being expelled from your own legacy. About what it feels like to grieve for someone who is still alive, who still answers your texts when it suits her but ignores you when the spotlight turns off. I wrote until my hands cramped, until the words stopped making sense, until the pain in my chest faded just enough to let me sleep. When I woke up the next morning, it felt like the first breath after a deep dive. I hadn't dreamed. I hadn't tossed and turned. For the first time in weeks, my mind had rested. I got up, made coffee, and opened the windows. The air smelled of leaves and rain, of something new, of an ending that had finally accepted being an ending. I didn't check social media. I didn't wonder how the honeymoon was going. I didn't listen to the voicemail again. I just sat there, letting the morning settle around me, knowing that something had closed and that it couldn't be reopened. Not with money, not with guilt, not even with time. Time didn't rush to heal me. It never does. It worked slowly, like sap moving inside a tree trunk, constant, deliberate, almost invisible, until one day you realize something in you has hardened. Not into bitterness, but into truth. In the weeks following the wedding, I heard nothing from Emily. No apologies, no explanations, no attempt to reconnect beyond that voice message I deleted. At first, I checked my phone more often than I'd admit, half expecting to see her name appear, but it never did, and over time I stopped expecting it. The silence between us stretched until it became a kind of clarity. There is something deeply sobering about realizing that your daughter, your blood, can live a full and happy life without even acknowledging your existence. It hurts, of course, but it also frees you. It takes away the weight of false hope, and in its place, you find a kind of peace you didn't know was possible. I filled my time with new rituals. I started hiking again, something I used to love before life got too heavy. There was something healing about walking through the woods, without a destination, without noise, just the crunch of leaves under my boots and a distant hum of bird songs. I signed up for a woodworking class at the community center and spent my Saturday morning sanding rough cedar and carving small bowls that served no purpose other than teaching me patience. The instructor, a woman named Lisa, was around 50 and had the calm of someone who has been through more than she lets on. She never asked personal questions, but one morning, while we waited for a finish to dry, she said, "People think wood breaks from pressure, but actually it breaks from neglect. You have to pay attention, or it will crack without you realizing it." I didn't answer, just nodded. But the metaphor landed right in my chest. I also started volunteering quiet, behind-the-scenes work at a downtown shelter, restocking supplies, organizing donations, fixing broken shelves. It gave me something to pour myself into that wasn't family, wasn't blood, wasn't tangled in expectations. The director, an older man named Charles, told me once, "The trick isn't finding people who need you, it's learning to give without becoming invisible." That phrase stayed with me. It helped me understand what had gone wrong with Emily. I hadn't just given too much, I had allowed myself to disappear in the process. And once someone learns they can take from you without acknowledging your humanity, they rarely stop on their own. You have to mark the limit. You have to say, "This far and no further." And you have to mean it. Karen came by more often after the wedding, sometimes with leftovers, sometimes just to sit and talk. We didn't talk much about Emily, only in passing, like an old wound we learned not to touch too much. But one afternoon, while we watched the sun hide behind the trees from my porch, she said, "You know, I used to envy you. The way you loved her was so unconditional." I looked at her, surprised. She shrugged. "I'm not saying you were wrong. I'm just saying it's hard to learn that love has to include boundaries, especially with your own children." I nodded. And for a long while, we said nothing else. We just stood there, two aging siblings watching the light fade and thinking about the things we couldn't fix. A few weeks later, I saw a father and his daughter in the park. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, chasing bubbles while her dad laughed and clapped. The scene hit me unexpectedly hard. I stood there a moment watching them. That simple show of love, of joy, of safety. I didn't feel jealousy. It just reminded me how fleeting those moments are. How quickly a laugh can turn into silence. How one day you are a superhero and the next you are just a burden in a family photo they decide not to take. I walked away before the sting settled too deep, but that image stayed with me. Sweet and sad in equal parts. Emily didn't call on my birthday. She didn't send a card, didn't write an email, didn't even acknowledge the day. And still, I didn't reach out. Not because I was angry, but because I knew where that road led. I knew that the moment I broke the silence, I would step back into the same role I had just fought to get out of, the convenient dad, the reliable backup, the emotional sponge absorbing her indifference in exchange for crumbs of connection. I deserve more than that. We both deserve it. And if she ever came back, it would have to be on different terms. Terms that began with recognition, not expectations. I don't know if she will come back. I no longer allow myself to fantasize about that. Healing isn't about waiting for the other person to change. It's about making peace with the possibility that they might not. It's about learning to stand firm in the life you've built, even if it's quieter than you planned, even if it's lonelier, because silence isn't the enemy, disappearance is. And I will never disappear again just to keep someone else comfortable. I am still a father. I still carry the memories, the love, the hope, but I am no longer hers in the way she expects. I am not a blank check or a silent witness. I am a man who loved deeply, who gave everything, and who finally learned to stop giving to someone who never looked back. So now, when people ask if I have children, I say, yes, I have a daughter. She's an adult. We're not in contact right now. And I leave it there. I don't explain, I don't apologize, because the truth doesn't need decoration, it just needs room to breathe. I'm still learning to live with the hole where her presence used to be, but I'm also learning that holes aren't always wounds. Sometimes they are boundaries. Sometimes they are the outline of a love that had to be let go. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you love to protect your peace, then you know how hard it is to draw that line, and even harder to keep it. Keep it. Keep it. Keep it. Keep it.
Oh, so chunky, so chunky. Wait, please tell me that there's a part 2. What was that? You know, I love my friends, but it doesn't mean that I would trust them with my haircut. POV, your most expensive moisturizer shatters, but you're not a quitter. Wait, but there's glass in there, babe.
This is some real embarrassing, and I need to deal with it. And I will deal with it.
Not the magic cream.
I just cannot believe this is happening right now.
I mean, that might not have glass in it, but there is a high probability that that could have glass in it. Now you will for realsies have glass skin. I'm sorry. That was one of your ones. You know what? You're such a critic, you know? Like, you just come in here and you just criticize me all the time. I'm just trying to make you better. Well, you're not. You're making me insecure. I'd be insecure too if I looked like that. You do look like that. You literally look like me. In her defense, Charlotte's magic cream is some good. Like, it's worth every penny, in my opinion. I really love it. Obviously, there's great moisturizers out there, but that stuff, magic in a bottle or a glass container. Oh, we've got a male beauty fail. Beauty is not synonymous with femininity, friends. Oh, I hate these. Oh, I hate these so much.
I don't think it's ready.
It's ready?
Yeah, it might be ready.
Go for it, sister.
Ah! Oh no! Oh, that one hurt. That yeah, for sure. No going back. You know what? I love to see it. I love to see some men involving themselves in the beauty community, because the fact